when I'm back at home and I sit first thing in the morning, and I've learned from the first immersion I sat with you how valuable it is to lie down and rest for a while after the meditation. But at home, I find that almost impossible. And part of my question is if there is a way to manage that, because by the time I've taken the time to give myself that meditation on the cushion, I try to lie down and really rest into that. But by then, my mind is just planning the day. I can't keep away the thoughts of the stuff that's waiting to be done. You know, I'm a practical person, so very likely during the day I've got various tasks to look to. And in the end, I often just give up on that resting time because I feel I'm not really resting. I'm not really allowing the meditation through, because I'm kind of moving into action, really. So it frustrates me that is what happens, but I haven't found a way to kind of keep a barrier between the time for that practice and the rest of my day.
Okay, so let's take this as a chance to expose certain collectively held biases when it comes to productivity, efficiency, and whatever goes under that. And this is very important. I would even say that in all these kind of courses of how to manage, how to be successful, how to be effective, how to be creative, these are the hidden jewels or the hidden hints of what is really going on. There is a tendency, and it's a very strong tendency, that if we have a lot of things to do, and as long as we keep our mind occupied with this, then somehow we excel, or somehow we are more in charge. Whereas this is actually, if you will, not found and not even backed up, neither by experiences nor by any verifiable data. Because activity is a result of the way we think. Action does not exist outside of thought. Action is a thought naturally translated into movement. But thought in itself has power only if that thought is steeped in that language we could say backed up by being. So therefore you might have heard that saying, our thinking is rooted in being, just like our actions are rooted in thinking. So if all our mental processes are enriched in being, then they are naturally life-supporting, productive, even maybe sometimes against the odds, because we'll be saved doing unnecessary things sometimes. We might even miss a meeting because that meeting was not meant to be. It's not going to bring us anything. In the moment, we might get frustrated. Living out of the spontaneity is a very, very difficult affair because we are, if you will, taught, cultured to live in a much more structured, constructive way. And yet, when you begin to do something which is less let's say, than just going into the office where there is a cubicle where everything is kind of assigned, right? It's easy to work for large companies and corporations because there's very little is required from one other than functioning. But becoming your own boss, becoming your own practitioner, running your own practice, having your own studio, making your own objects of art, painting, making your own poetry, publishing your own books, let alone running your own company, you realize that it's a very, very fluid affair. If you lean on structure, where you come to the office in your cubicle, everything feels so, there is this kind of almost seductive element of how well it's all organized here. But let us not get completely affected by often superficial state of affairs. We know during the crises, financial crises, how some companies become bankrupt because they simply did not even produce anything. We know how many offices and many businesses went out of the window because they were essentially just a lot of fluff. People well dressed pretend to do important things, engaged in important conversations, but it's all a hot air. Whereas when we become, let's say, more in the domain of the so-called self-employed, we know the fruits of our actions and we know the results of our input directly because it's very tangible. But the way we function here, rooted in the way of how much we have managed to steep our mind in the being. Therefore, if the times you gave yourself for these moments of direct, let's say, diving into the bottomless ocean of being, you are kept, forgive me, prisoner to that surface vibration of, oh, I need to do that, yet I need to do that, that it's a waste of time. Because you're already not doing that. You're neither doing anything, nor really giving yourself to what this time assigned for spiritual discipline, mental. So in other words, you are neither succeeded in that, nor succeeded in the other. It's better to thrust oneself into the action completely and let that action be a meditation. Or when you give yourself to meditation, let the whole world finish there and then, completely cease to exist. I would say that it takes a lot of understanding first, then of course backed up by courage to make few mistakes and to experience for oneself. But sooner or later you will realize that if you can give yourself to one type of activity fully at a given moment in time, it creates this new, if you will, alliances within yourself, this rewiring taking place, where you are simply much better. It's like you have an operating system which can function under very different circumstances. So it's already wired to be resilient to stress, to be resilient to this, to be constantly in alignment towards what that experience really brings, because it has to bring joy. One way or the other, whatever we do, it's our job to extract joy out of every experience. Maybe the word joy here is one-sided, because it's kind of like joy almost equals here or synonymous to enjoyment, and for a good reason. Maybe there should be another term, not so much of a joy, but a deep satisfaction, a deep sense of purpose lived fully. Whatever the experience is, amidst of the unpleasant experience, an experience that was contrary to what one was anticipating on that particular day, on that particular phase of one's life. And yet, it is our job to extract that. You see? Extract that. It's very hard thing to do, because we are grown up, but we still are very much like kids if we are not equipped. You know, like the kid is anticipating to go to a birthday party, and then the last minute that birthday party is cancelled, or the mother cannot drive, or the father can, like there's something, some obstruction. The disappointment is enormous, you see? Everything is thwarted. It's kind of the end of the world in a child's psyche. And in the adult developed psyche, it's an opportunity for an interesting experience. Because when something lapsed, something else is rising, because that's in the nature of things. It can be from mundane, just little thing, you know, to terrifyingly, bewilderingly, to disarmingly, something which reminds us that really, really, we do not have all the knowledge of how things will unfold. But the best we could do is to simply be wired to meet it all, the way that it presents something in disguise. Like this sort of lines that, you know, sometimes attributed to this person, sometimes attributed to Bruce Lee. And, you know, don't wish for an easy life. Wish that you have strength to endure a hard one, a difficult one. These are simple words of wisdom. It's a Tao. It's the teaching of the Tao. Because if we wish something for ourselves, which is essentially against the common sense of life, then we are constantly faced with trashed expectations, one way or the other. So, but going back to that, what's going on in terms of the productivity, let's say now, the success in thinking. As we have said, thinking is rooted in being. The more being is available at the level of mental vibrations, the more of everything there is. Absolutely everything. So the ability to solve anything that rises is very natural and not at the expense of stress. So when you said that I'm practical by nature person, then if you are really practical, then you need to go and examine this to the fullness of your capacity as to what goes on into the productivity and what is really, really here measured and spoken of in terms of a success.
And actually, it's really helpful. But as a craftsman or as a maker, as a person that has always made things, I've recognized that often for that, the concentration and the process, the creative and side of it, and also the technical side of making something, is in itself a meditation. It becomes a meditation very often, and everything else falls away. So I understand the value of that for me, which is not the same as a sitting kind of meditation, but it's still something that's helped me a lot, I think. because often the process is more important than the productivity or the end result when I reflect on it.
Yes, often it's spoken in these terms. I'm not sure if you decide to make a movie, then you will settle on that.
No,
because
not.
It's an expensive affair. A movie needs to deliver. The end result actually means, the whole thing is in the end result. I also think when people built Canterbury Cathedral, they were not just like, oh, let's see what happens. So
yeah.
I
meant
just
more
like
that
taking this
I'm
as,
not always happy with what I've ended up with.
That's different story. Yes, of course. What we set our goals, what we envision, not always being met. And the true mark of a creative person and an artist is not always being like, anything goes. Something looks like this poop and it's like, oh, wow, what a sculpture, In the ceramic classes, right? You make 10, maybe 20 shapes, and you're eager to throw them into the kiln furnace to fire them. But the tutor will be like, I'm sorry, this is, we're not going to run 2,500, furnace now to fire this. It's too expensive, I'm sorry. Let's put to calcify form which worth to be kept, even, used for some time. But the novice is like enamored with anything that comes out of hand because it's like magnificent. And of course, they say, if your kid did the scribble, put it on the fridge. It's actually good for self-esteem. Well, guess what? Our kids don't even ask us. They just go and pin it and put it on the fridge themselves, like magnetic stuff there, It's like, I want everyone to see what I've done today. But that's the difference. So let me retrace, and you speak of that becomes meditation. So everything should ideally be or carry these qualities, every activity. The purpose of meditation is not to forever meditate just to, I meditate and then I go back to the activity. At some point, we aim at blurring the contours, blurring the differences, so that what we do in activity, what we do in our daily life, becomes a meditation. In other words, it's not as sharp, not as sharply marked. And the sooner that happens in any field, in any enterprise, the better that is. So at some point, that what is experienced in meditation, that same feeling of that equilibrium, of that being absorbed, is being experienced whilst we are amidst of being busy about whatever we are meant to be doing. So this being able to fall, right? Being able to rest in, right? Being able to get absorbed, reclaimed. It's also part of the spiritual practices, and certainly that's what Tantra is about. Tantra is to find oneself in absorption amidst whatever that is, amidst the most demanding activity, where all the operatives are functioning and active. So, therefore, predisposition or the attitude of giving yourself fully to whatever one does has this element that creates these connections, you see, in the cortexes. Otherwise, if we keep like, this is my spiritual practice, but when I'm sitting down on a cushion, all I'm thinking about, what I need to do. And then when I'm busy in my actions, all I'm thinking that I'm failing to do the spiritual practitioner, and so I'm here, I'm missing that, and there I'm missing this. We don't want that to happen. We don't want this sort of like, oh, I wish I was more introverted. I would, like, somewhere where verve is required from you. There is some character is required. And you're like, oh, I'm bored with all this stuff. I just want to sit and be completely absorbed in my own. But when we get absorbed, it's like, oh, I'm bored here because it's not enough challenging. And anyway, my head is full of thoughts. I want to get out of this room and up from that cushion. And what is it here we're speaking of? What is it? Let's not miss it. What is going on here? It's simply not being fully present. It's somehow not being able to afford somehow. I can't afford to relax and let go. Because if I'll release and let go, the whole world will collapse. Certainly my corner of the universe. My universe, my something. Well, I have a news for you. Maybe not news, but I have a good news. A good gospel here. That these have been tried and tested by a lot of people firsthand. Sometimes when we can afford everything to lapse and go as it is, we are literally amidst of most amazing, extraordinary breakthroughs. Because it's all already orchestrated in the most extraordinary of ways. There is this arrangement, this alignment. And I can tell you, being on the road for so many years, when the certainty is the last thing, how that works in the miraculous of ways. And of course, being a householder, it's not like you live alone and you can just, I can afford to do that. In the sense of, but you share your life. You have people who are, let's say, dependent on you. So you have to kind of sharpen up, you have to be more responsible and so forth. But how many times that sense of responsibility here is misunderstood? So we don't want that to happen. Because this is also our responsibility to trust, have unwavering trust. And that out of that unwavering trust, something else comes into the being. Tremendous reassurance, tremendous force, because in that contracted state of how is it going to pan out and everything, a lot of energy is wasted into these protective mechanisms of imaginary yet not happened or yet to come. So in other words, it doesn't even exist. It's the dragons and the smokes and illusions.
Yeah, well, that's so true for me, because my early life trauma, if you like, created a person who needed to try and keep safe and created boundaries and structures and for protection, and was full of anticipatory fears the whole time. And it's taking me all my life to challenge that or unravel that or learn trust and to see grace when it comes and invite grace to come. And I have so many experiences of that happening. And still there's a small boy inside who fears something's going to go wrong, who protects and puts up boundaries where actually, and to use your own word, this self-realization is about dissolving. And I can't dissolve if I'm going to constantly be protecting something kind of at a very deep, unconscious level. So it's very relevant what you're saying.
Well, I would hope so. And what is also relevant is quantum approach here. A quantum leap is required. So in other words, we can spend our entire life working on ourselves. We can spend entire life trying to get to the bottom of something which prevents us one way or the other. And there are methodologies and there are, licensed and, copyrighted programs how this is meant to be done. This approach, that approach. It's all fine. At least we forget what is really the goal here. What is really the goal here? And what is a byproduct? When the goal is properly envisioned and set, all this, what is otherwise sold, right, as the real goods, is a byproduct of what happens by itself. Therefore, realignment here or shift happens at the quantum level. It's literally, it happens not at the level of, if I've done this, then it will take me here. And if that has been passed through, then it will take me here. This is way too linear perspective. Therefore, this, if you will, total reshuffling of what and who is working on what is required. If reference is constantly what happened to me at a certain point and how this affected again me and how that, what repercussions it has caused, and then I'm obviously here a victim of circumstances, and so this somehow need to be now addressed by me again. So it may be easier for some, more difficult for others. We don't know the degree and the depth, and we don't know where and how long it's going to take. So it's almost like, unless this is completely turned upside down, completely uprooted, then we may spend for the rest of our life trying to adjust something here. Adjust, Whereas in this adjustment, the main adjustment never took place. We almost bypassed or somehow refused to acknowledge what required one and the only adjustment, and spend a lot of energy and time on adjusting that, what is the consequence, a byproduct, a consequence, not the cause. The cause is always in that. This cause is in taking fully, utterly and entirely the power of one's awareness into projecting it onto this individual being, literally forgetting that in doing so, it simply usurps and creates an imaginary personality, imaginary person, a fictitious character. And living in that fictitious character, fantastic, we can live, no problem. But live in that fictitious character in the Shakespearean terms. Play your part very well, but deep inside know what is going on. There's nothing wrong. Everyone else, you can fool everyone as long as you remain true to yourself. As long as you remain true to yourself. It doesn't matter how you go around. You can be, you can play this role, that role, whatever role you prefer. It doesn't matter. But if you're trying to be true in all circumstances, but not really true to the self, then the main job is not done. You see? So therefore that kid will constantly go back, or rather reappear and demand the attention. Because the pact is made. That pact which holds this fictitious character and makes it real. And it reinforces that connection. Even, in fact, sometimes working on it in a peculiar way reinforces it. You know, because as long as it's being fed, as long as that story is being maintained. And of course, it has this moment of like, letting go is like, wow, but this kid not just got this and that. There was also fantastic times. Right? There were amazing times. So letting go here of that kid, maybe letting go of something extremely precious about myself. Isn't it? So maybe that's what holds us back. It's something that will somehow irreversibly, it's like we will let go something so precious. But that is the job, my dear. This is your job. There's no other job. If you can do this job, then your job is done. Really. Then, it presupposes the event after something, isn't it? Then. Not prior, but then. And only then. Any role, any character, anything that is being played is only seen through for what it is. And you'd be actually surprised how extraordinary this is. You know, you want to be a method actor, fantastic. You know, be in that role for as long as you will. You want to be a Broadway performer? Yeah, great. But if identity has arrested you from who you are, then it's like you delivering the same lines over and over whilst nobody even watching. The show is over. The lights are off. Curtains are drawn. It's time to wash off the makeup. It's time to essentially completely relax and be who you are. And yet the show goes on. So this is a reminder of whenever something really feels deep, and you know, when that thorn or whatever that is feels strongly, gets under our skin, you know, under our rib, in our gut, wherever that is, in our heart, and causes us this sense of discontent. That in itself keeps that character alive because it's very precious. Because if you remove that, some tremendous portion will have to melt down. And you may not even know what is going to come up. So you might not even be prepared to face what is going to come up. I'm not saying exactly pertinent to your own story, but what I'm saying here is pertinent to the universal sense of identity. You see? This is essentially what this, again, another famous line that has been regurgitated, and that people were, this is Nelson Mandela, no, this is Marianne Williamson, no, you know, that this is our greatest fear is not about our limitations, I'm paraphrasing, about how small we are. The greatest fears actually is acknowledging the power, the sheer power with which we are all embedded. That's what we're really deep down afraid of. So we can talk about how can we, heal, how can we restore, how can we remove that, how can we dissolve that experience of the past. Lest we forget that in itself went into the making. Form is cast, it's all together, it's in the mix, you know? Can you give me this pesto without garlic? Oh, I'm sorry, sir, garlic is already in the mix. Whatever that is in the mix is part of the recipe or part of the how it came about. What to do? You see?